Good morning, Judy.
Good morning, Francesca.
Thank you for joining me today, August 1st, which just so happens to be Emancipation Day. And we're going to talk about Emancipation Day, or a little bit more about it later on in our conversation. So, Judy, you are the curator for the Helson Gallery Cultural Center in Halton Hills. So can you tell us a little bit about the Cultural Center and your role there?
Absolutely. So the Cultural Center consists of the Helson Gallery, which I'm the curator of, as you mentioned, also the Halton Hills Public Library, and the John Elliott Theater. So it is a complex of cultural facility, and it's right in downtown Georgetown, operated by the town of Halton Hills. So a bit of background on the facility. As you know, Francesca, our gallery is located in a historic church. So this is a beautiful 19th century building that was part of the community for many, many years. And then in the early part of the 20th century, it was given to the town of Halton Hills to be operated, sorry, it wasn't the town of Halton Hills at that time, but to the community of Georgetown to be operated as a public library. So for many years, it served the community as a library. And then in the 1980s, it sort of underwent some expansion. And first they added on to expand the library facility. They later added the theater. And at that point, the church building became the gallery. So it was really involved a lot with the local artists of the community. And there was no curator of the gallery at that time. Like local artists and arts organizations, they kind of self-curated exhibitions into the gallery. And so that went on for a number of years, and it was a real focal point for local artists in the community. Then in 2012, the town was offered a very significant gift of art from a local resident and a collector of art. And that gentleman is Mr. Fred Helson. And he offered these 103 works of art to the town to be sort of a permanent collection. And actually, this work of art you see behind me is one of those paintings.
Okay.
So it's a very beautiful grouping of historical Canadian and European painting. And in recognition of his gift, the town rebranded. So they named the gallery for Mr. Helson. And because of this collection, at that point, they had to hire a curator. So that's when I came on board. That was in early 2013. And my primary role was to make sure there was someone who would be able to care for this important collection, but then to also start organizing curated exhibitions for the gallery. So it went from being kind of an artist-run space to being a curated space. And that's basically been my role there, as I said, looking after this important collection. Also, what often happens when someone makes a really high-profile gift of art, other people come forward. So there's some other collectors who lived in the community, and they brought forward works of art for donation to the collection. So the collection really expanded from this group of 100 paintings. It's now close to 700 paintings and other works of art that have been donated. So I care for that. I curate the exhibitions in the gallery, also the lobby space, which, as you know, is the area outside the library, the theater, which is also a really good exhibition space that we rotate almost on a monthly 4 to 6 week kind of basis. So there's a higher turnover of exhibitions in the lobby than there are in the gallery. The other important role that I play is with our public programs. So we do education programs for the general public and also for schools. So that's kind of a nutshell.
In a nutshell, there's a lot going on there, Judy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Right. And so you and I met about 4 years ago through the Halton Black History Awareness Society's organization. And it was our quest at the time for space to hold exhibits for our artists. And so I've managed this ever-growing art exhibit featuring artists of color showing their work specific to the theme of what freedom means to them and how fitting that is for what is actually happening in our world today. So what are your thoughts on our exhibits, the timeliness of them, and the feedback from your community? Because I believe we've been there since 2017, 2018.
Yes, you're correct.
And well, 2019 and then 2020, we're not there this year. But so what are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think it's been a great relationship, Francesca, that we've had with the HBHAS, and that I'm glad we were able to grow it over a period of a few years, because we started out with those exhibitions in the lobby. And as I mentioned, it is a high profile space, but we really felt we wanted to take it to another level. And then last summer, you organized the exhibition to be held in the gallery exhibition space, which, as you know, is a very beautiful space, very welcoming and inviting. And also, you know, it's higher profile, I believe, for the artists to show in that space. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to grow the exhibition in that regard. It's a shame about this year, right? Because I think it would have been so timely to have organized something, but you know, circumstances are just against it. And, you know, I think it was the right thing to do to, you know, we discussed some months back about canceling because we really didn't even know if our facility would be open at this time. But
that's right.
Having the focus of Emancipation Day, I think it's been great for public education and awareness, because I think a lot of our community is not aware of the celebration of the event, the significance of the event. And I think the exhibitions have really been important in helping to raise that awareness. And I think about last year, last year's show in particular, because I think we had it's always been a diverse selection of artists, that you've chosen artists that are various levels of their career, which is great to bring that kind of a group together. You get some interesting things happening, and I felt that was really strongly seen last year. Like with the younger artists, there were a couple of young women who were, you know, very still in the student stage of their career, and Amber Carroll, of course, you had showcased her in the previous two shows, and I believe she was even just a high school student, maybe.
Yes, she was. Yes,
extremely high caliber of work. And I think what's also evident is that she's looking to kind of be challenging with her work, right? So like make the viewer think about things like conventional ideas of beauty or whatever. There's also Katrina Lindo last year, also a student and emerging artist, and you know, an interesting work there that I think sort of challenges viewers to think about self-identity. So getting at some interesting issues through the work of the artists. And another thing that really stands out in my mind about last year's show was the exhibition or the display that Lisa Meacham organized of the coded quilts.
Yes.
And because I'm in the gallery a lot, like you know, we have volunteer staff who greet visitors, but I often go down and chat to people. And I remember that really being a standout of what people commented, because many of our visitors did not know anything about this aspect of history of the coded quilts being made to direct slaves to the road to freedom, the Underground Railroad. And a lot of people found this just a fascinating aspect of history. So I think it was so important that the exhibition raised that awareness and was able to, you know, introduce people to something, aspect of history they knew nothing about. So
right. And our mandate from the beginning has been to bring awareness into the community about these amazing artists of color that we have locally here. So some of the artists we have featured have been Georgia Fullerton, we've had Nicole Alexander. From a little further afield, we've had Wayne Headley come out. We've even had Macaulay Atelli, if I've pronounced his name right, be a contributor. As you've mentioned, we've had Lisa Meacham and Katrina Lindo, who's fairly new. Rachel, I think, was new with us last year.
Yes.
And behind me, I'm actually exhibiting some of the work of Joan Butterfield, art innovator, who has exhibited with us for the past 2 years. So, as well as Ian Grant. I don't want to forget anybody. I may have forgotten a few people.
Anna Maria Dickinson as well had, I think,
Anna
all
Maria
three
as well. Yeah, we've really pulled together a fantastic group, and we will miss being with you this year, this summer, but we do look forward to seeing you in 2021. I know we've already discussed some preliminary thoughts on dates. And in fact, you know, we would have been showing the August 1 Emancipation Day art exhibit that commemorates the abolition of the Slavery Act today. But as I said, we'll be back next summer. We've had tremendous success with the event, and it all really started or kind of snowballed, I thought, after the mayor actually had invited us to return when he came out to visit, if you remember, in 2018.
Yes, yeah. The mayor was very supportive. And,
very supportive.
Yeah, so, and that's great. And also some of the local council people came out to, maybe that was in 2018, 2017, but, you know, really helping to spread awareness on that level, which is so important.
Yes, and we've appreciated all the support because it really wasn't our plan to be there for even more than a year. We just thought, okay, well, we'll start here and see how we grow. But again, we've had such success and we've been so happy having the space, having our exhibits on the 2 levels, and then having it featured inside the church itself was last year was stunning. Lot of memories. So as I said, we do look forward to coming back. And if I could ask a question, sort of a little different question, what makes your cultural center different from other cultural centers for people looking to exhibit with you?
Okay, well, I think, as I mentioned, like just sort of our physical layout, because we do have those options. So the gallery space inside the historic church and that lobby space, which is a really public facing one.
A lot of foot traffic.
Lot of foot traffic. And I think with a cultural center too, what makes it different is because you draw an audience that's not necessarily people who are there to visit an art gallery, right? Like they may be patrons of the library or the theater, but they see the art. And so you engage the general public in a way that I think like a standalone gallery doesn't necessarily, right? Like someone goes to a gallery anticipating seeing an art exhibition and wanting to, you know, engage with an art exhibition in that way. But in our facility, I think you're kind of getting, it's more community friendly and public facing. And as I said, you might have people who are primarily there to use the library or the theater, but then see the art, and you can really help to cultivate an interest in art in those people. And I find that that's really the case too, you know, when they do a theater event. Now, unfortunately, there's not likely to be events in the theater for many months to come, but there's always an effort to have the gallery open during the intermission, right? So that the public can come in and wander around, take a look at the exhibition. So that way, I think, as a cultural center, we're able to reach like a wider audience. So I think we're very community friendly, you know, public facing, community focused. For artists, something that makes us a bit different a consideration, particularly in the gallery, is the architecture of that space. And Francesca, you know, if you visit other galleries, you know, most of them, they describe them as a box, right? Like ideally an art gallery is just this, a box type of space. And, you know, it is focused completely on the exhibition of the art within a very kind of pristine sort of space. Whereas our space is not like that at all. It's architecturally, you know, it has important features like beautiful stained glass windows. As you know, there is a really prominent large window on one wall, which is simply beautiful. So those, I think, have an impact on how the art is presented in the space, those architectural features. And that's a consideration for artists as well. I remember at last year's opening, because I think we were doing, it was sort of later, or like early evening, right? And so the sun was on such an angle that it was striking that large, beautiful stained glass window and
Yes.
casting all these reflections on the floor and on the walls.
Beautiful colors.
Yeah, and I remember like artists, some of them were going around taking photographs of just the space itself in that respect, not the artwork, but what was happening to the artwork because of that beautiful stained glass window. So I think that is a different thing for artists too. And that's often a comment we hear from the public, like somebody who's not ever been to the gallery before and comes into that space and is really, the space itself is so impressive, has a great high vaulted ceiling as well, in addition to those stained glass windows. So it's great that they preserve the architecture of that building, you know, because they could have just put up a bunch of walls inside to, like I said, to make it into a box and then lose that sort of space. But I think that it really gives it a different feeling and focus. It's very warm and inviting. It's used often for public events, performances, music. It's a beautiful space for that type of thing.
Beautiful and unique. Beautiful and unique, most definitely. So when you're planning a display then, Judy, what are the tasks that you handle?
Well, in some cases, so in the case of the HBHAS exhibition, so we would contract out basically to a curator, as we did with you, looking for you know, someone who has expertise in a certain area. And there's been a couple other shows where we do that, but by and large, most of the exhibitions are curated by myself. So that means it's pretty much everything from the initial planning process and figuring out the timing, like what's going to work best in terms of scheduling, what kind of programs we can build around an exhibition. That's also an important consideration. As I mentioned, we do school programs. So, you know, we want to have maybe a certain time of year when we have a key focus for school programs, an exhibition that will really connect to the curriculum and, you know, that will be suitable for school groups. So I start with that, kind of building all that initial planning. I usually plan our exhibitions about a year and a half out. So, you know, we're looking into 2021, of course, now, and obviously we had to cancel exhibitions and reschedule exhibitions as well. So I start with the planning and then identifying the artists who will be participating. Sometimes we do a call for artists. So we would be putting out through our website, social media, etc., looking for artists working on a particular theme. Or each year, for example, in the summer, we do a show of local artists. And the focus is just for them to present their recent work so that, you know, the public can kind of stay up to date and here's what artists are working on, here's what they're thinking about, etc. So we try to do that as a kind of a current local artist show each year, and that has a call for submission. Sometimes there will be works that are being lent, like from private collections, etc., or other institutions. So I would look after those arrangements, and you know, there's paperwork and insurance and transportation all involved with that. And then to physically organize the show in the space. So I feel I'm like a hands-on curator. Like I like to be involved very much in how the show is presented in the space. And so that's the physical hanging of the exhibition. I have help with that. And there is an assistant curator for the gallery who assists with those tasks and some of the other, as I mentioned, paperwork, things like that. But the physical installation I like to be involved with. And then, so the final piece really is the programming and what will we do around an exhibition, whether it's an opening event, like we did with HBHAS, which was great because artists came out and spoke in addition to representatives of the organization like Dennis Scott. But you know, I think having the opportunity for the public to hear an artist speak is an extremely valuable experience because they just, you know, lots of people do not connect with artists. They maybe don't know artists in their day-to-day life. And, you know, sometimes there's a barrier between a visitor and works of art. And I think if they're able to hear an artist talk about what motivates them, how they create their work, I find that most people are very interested in that type of thing. So we try to make sure we have programming that helps to interpret an exhibition for the public, so that somebody just walks in and thinks, oh, I don't understand this, so I don't care, and I'm going to leave. We want to try to, to help facilitate understanding and appreciation. So I think that's a really important part of the curating process.
Right. So you really do have your hands full, because you do wear many hats when you are coordinating an exhibit, and I know you will invite the artists as well to come in and be a part of putting it all together, which I think is great. As well as myself, I've contributed my 2 cents worth here and there.
Absolutely, yeah, and extremely valuable ways, Francesca. Absolutely.
Which has been a lot of fun for me and a learning experience, as well as having Dennis Scott, our chair, come out to speak and greet everybody, and to your comment about having the artists themselves speaking to people that have come out to view the shows and the exhibits. We've been lucky enough to have Georgia Fullerton speak, I think on 2 occasions now, to really give people a sense of the meaning behind why we're coming into the community, and why we want to not just have a presence, but really bring that awareness into the community that it's for everybody. It's for everybody to see their contributions and to see the world through their eyes.
Yeah. Georgia was great. That really stands out in my mind, because she is such an articulate speaker. And remember that she spoke last year, and previous years too, you had Jenny Lynn speak, and I also thought she brought a different perspective to it, but really insightful, and also a terrific speaker. And like I said, I think people really love that. They love to be able to engage, to hear the artist's stories, and to what motivates them, and the thought process behind their work. It's really important to have that.
I'm curious to know, what has been the most successful exhibit you've had on display? Is there anything that comes to mind, or something that really stands out?
Francesca. So one thing, looking at how you might measure success, right? So we track attendance figures. So it's important to know how many people visit the gallery. So one way of looking at success would be, which show brought the most visitors. I think in that regard, a show that I think about is one that we held in 2018, and it was with a national organization. So this is the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor, which represents artists from across the country. And they organize exchange exhibitions. And the year we hosted their show, they were offering an exchange show with the French Watercolor Society. So this is not French Canada, this is France, the National Watercolor Society of France. So they organized, so they had works of art brought over from France, and they did framing and all that on location at the gallery. So they didn't ship works that had already been framed. Obviously that would have added to the cost in terms of freight and transportation. So there was a really big volunteer crew behind that show and organizing it, which is great, because I simply could not have done it without their support. But some of the artists, as it was an exchange exhibition, so some of those artists from France came to Canada, and the members of the Watercolor Society who lived in and around the GTA, they put them up at their homes. They organized all sorts of events with those groups, like to go out on painting trips. They took them to Toronto Center Island to do a painting trip. Like it was kind of being ambassadors for Canada in a way, to have these artists. So, because there were a large number of artists, so it included our Canadian watercolor painters and these French artists, we had a really strong turnout. So in terms of attendance, I felt that is probably one of our best attended exhibitions, and was very popular with the public. But from a personal standpoint, like there's
Yep.
another show that comes to my mind that I organized in 2017, and it was the work of historic Canadian women artists. And for that, I borrowed a lot from private collections, and some in Toronto, some in Guelph, and in our Georgetown area. And we're looking at women artists in the late 19th and the early 20th century. And it was a bit of an art history lesson for people, but I felt it was really successful in terms of the educational component of that, because a lot of people are not aware that, you know, they just think, well, because the art history books don't have women artists in them, that means there were no women artists. And that is not true at all. It was simply that, you know, for the most part, art history books were written by men, and women were excluded. So, and there's been growing interest in the last few decades in the work of women artists and elevating it, really. So some of those historic painters, their artworks are becoming better recognized, they're becoming more valuable to collectors. But for decades, many of those women were just, you know, working in obscurity. And you know, everybody knows the group of 7 painters who were all men, but you know, there were women who were, you know, almost as talented, who were kind of working in their shadows. So that was, from my standpoint, like in terms of educational success, I felt that was a very successful show. And we had a lot of good comments on the exhibition. So
Sounds really interesting. You said that was in 2017?
I think it was late. I'm trying to get my dates right. I think it was late 2016, early 2017 that we did that. It's going back a few years, but again, as I said, I have strong memories of that in terms of like public feedback about that show. And that
it sounds really exciting. It actually sounds like something repeatable, something that you can bring out again, most definitely, because it just brought to mind the fact that the majority of our artists when we first started were female artists of color, which I thought was great, you know. And I'm just thinking, for 2021, are there any special projects that you'll be bringing out because of the delay this year and having to hold everything back, hopefully until 2021? Or is there anything special that comes to mind?
So there's a big one, Francesca, and again, this is a historic focus show, but there was, most people know the French Impressionists, right? That's the very famous painters of the late 19th century, like Claude Monet and Degas, etc. But there were Canadian artists who were working in that movement, who were really reflecting the principles of that movement in their work. And this is also in late 19th, early 20th century Canada. So we're going to do an exhibition of Canadian Impressionism. And this is all borrowed from private collections. It was scheduled for this fall. And I just felt there's really no way, like this, it deserves to have attention and to be able to draw an audience. And I was just afraid that given the circumstances, it really wouldn't get the audience that it deserved. So we have postponed that. An important thing about that exhibition was tying into school programming. Because I think, you know, schools see Impressionism, I think there's going to be interest. And it's something that, you know, they might ordinarily have to take their students to a bigger gallery to see that type of a show. And that's why we're great, because we're this local alternative, and some schools could even like walk to our gallery. But unfortunately, given the situation with schools, it seems very unlikely that schools will be making field trips. So we're going to push that into 2021. At the moment, the schedule is a bit fluid, but you know, we're certainly holding August of next year for the Halton Black History Awareness Society.
Hold our spot for us,
You
most
bet.
definitely. With the Impressionist program that you're looking to bring next year, sounds very, very exciting. So I definitely look forward to hearing more about that. And, you know, Judy, as you're aware of this whole pandemic crisis has changed the way we travel, it's changed the way we're taking in the museums and the art galleries. So how have you kept the local community engaged throughout this whole pandemic?
So a big thing, back when we closed, which was in March, we were gearing up for school programs. And of course,
Right.
we were also dealing with the teacher strike and waiting for resolution of that. But we had a great exhibition that was organized with the school curriculum in mind, and we were just waiting to get the students in. And we do programming from like junior kindergarten up to grade 8, so for a pretty wide audience. And of course, when the doors closed and it was apparent that, you know, school was not going to be resuming until at least the fall at the earliest. So that's one way we kind of look to engage with that audience, because we had really been hoping that they would be our mainstay during, you know, April, May, and June. So we created a series of online art lessons. And so the focus was learning at home, so teachers could adapt them and use them in their lesson plans. Students could also work through it at home. They were all based on materials that would be readily available, because that's an issue, of course. People weren't going to be going out and buying art supplies. So, and they made use of the exhibition that we had in the gallery. So we had examples of art that the kids would have been seeing if they had been able to come for the tour of the art gallery. So that was a good way to connect, and then to create lessons inspired around that. So we developed a series of lessons, and it was grade differentiated. We've included a kindergarten lesson plan, and we had a number of those on our website. So good response from teachers to that. Even a request from a local teacher at one of the French immersion schools to translate the lessons into French. So we did that to respond to the school's need. So that was very, very popular. And Francesca, that may also be our path forward in the fall, right? Like, we really don't know in terms of what we would be able to offer to schools. It might end up being, you know, the same thing, an online platform that we'd have to do that.
I was going to ask you what the cultural center has actually learned from this crisis. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like being flexible enough to adapt fairly quickly to bring your programming online.
Yeah, so flexible is the key word. And I think that goes across the board for the employees of the town of Halton Hills, not just those of us who work at the library and cultural center, but those who are involved in all aspects of what the town offers to the public. And obviously the town wanted to keep doing business, even though it physically closed the doors of the town hall, but to still be able to respond to the needs of the public and to keep day-to-day business going. So I think that flexibility, this is one of the key ways, as we mentioned at the outset, the Zoom platform, so that you're still able to meet and conduct business in this way. It's a great way to do it. I think it's very efficient. And I think going forward, even when staff are able to meet again, or if I'm able to meet with artists and the public again, I think we'll still continue to use this platform, probably for many months to come. And working from home, of course, I've adapted to that, but the gallery has recently reopened. So in mid-July, we opened again to the public. So I am starting to go into the cultural center, like maybe one or 2 days a week. And we will be starting to host exhibitions again in September. Like, we do have the current exhibition that when we had to close our doors in March, we were able to keep that exhibition in place.
So which one is that right now?
So that is a collection of a local person, Bruce Andrews, and he has a very extensive private collection. So that is going to stay in place until September, and then we're going to do our community show for local artists. So we're going to bring that back come September. The response to coming back into the gallery is slow. Like, I think the public is still, people are getting used to that idea, right? The library has reopened and is offering some of its service, but not a full service, right? Like, people basically can pre-order their materials online and they come in to pick them up. So it seems to me a lot of people are using the building, but they're just coming in to pick up library materials, maybe take a quick look at the gallery.
Pass through.
And you got it. And so, but again, I think it's important that you have to start somewhere to reestablish the gallery in the public eye. And
Right.
you hope that the situation is going to improve, and we're not going to have a major resurgence of COVID-19 come fall that's going to necessitate going back to the lockdown.
Right.
Everybody is hoping that that doesn't happen.
So
it's hard to plan.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the
Yeah.
plan. So Bruce Andrews is still on display.
Yes.
He's also, if people want to check him out to see who he is, he's also on your website?
Yes, on the gallery webpage. Yeah.
On the gallery webpage, which also has a call for artists if any artist was interested in making that connection. And did you say, if I heard you correctly, you're opening in the fall?
Actually, we are open now. But we're open with very limited public hours.
Right.
So
what are your hours?
So Tuesdays through Saturdays, 10 till noon. So only 2 hours each day.
2 hours.
With the exception of Sunday and Monday. So it's, as I said, it's just to slowly build our audience. The library is open also only 10 till 2, Tuesdays through Saturdays.
10 till 2.
So in September, they may start to resume more regular hours and be able to offer more of their services to the public. And we're kind of taking our cue from them. So if they start to expand their hours a little more to what their regular hours would have been, then we'll probably start to increase the gallery hours. Okay. And it's just, as I said, gauging the comfort level of the public. We're obviously making sure that people are practicing social distancing in the gallery. We limit the number of people who can come in at any time, providing hand sanitizer, masks, etc. People are screened when they come into the building. So anyone entering the building is now screened for COVID and asked to register. So that way, contact tracing is facilitated if there ever had to be a need to do that.
And it'll be most definitely a very different experience, but an experience nonetheless that'll allow us to continue to take in the wonderful exhibits that you do bring to us. And I can't thank you for your time today, Judy. It is such a gorgeous day outside. Before we go, I would like to know if you can tell us if anybody would like to be in touch with you, how can we get in touch with you? Okay,
so the best way would be via email, and that's judyd@haltonhills.ca.
judyd@haltonhills.ca?
Yeah, yeah.
That's an easy one. That's an easy one to remember.
Pretty easy. Yeah.
Well, Judy, thank you so much for your time today. This was a really nice way to, after a long period of time has gone by, to get updated, to find out how you've been managing and coping since COVID-19, and this whole pandemic and crisis has really, turned things on its head. But I think we're slowly going to make our way back to whatever will be our new normal. Yeah. And I look forward to continuing the working relationship. I'm speaking to you soon about how we'll coordinate our next exhibit for the Halton Black History Awareness Society for 2021. But in the meantime, thank you. And we'll talk to you soon, Judy.
Thank you, Francesca. It's been such an honor working with the HBHAS and such a pleasure working with you and getting to know you. So I really look forward to next year and better circumstances come August 1st, 2021.
Most definitely. Okay, on that note, have a great day. Thank
Judy.
You. Bye for now.
All right, bye-bye.